Okay, so welcome. And today we're starting at, in the missing link, at feelings on page 111, at least in the book that I have.
They're all the same. Yeah.
We're all the same. Okay. And Judy, would you like to start today?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start. So, excuse me. Our feelings are the barometer of our thoughts. When the mind is filled with positive thoughts, cause and effect rule, resulting in a positive feeling. When the mind is filled with negative thoughts, again, cause and effect rule, creating a negative feeling.
Well, that's simple yet profound, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
nobody taught me that in medical school.
Yeah.
Nobody taught me
Nobody
that.
ever thought that your feelings had a source within you.
Right, from within you.
Yeah.
You know, I love another place. Sid says your feelings are your thoughts in action.
Yeah.
And my metaphor for that was is that your feelings are the dance of your thoughts through your limbic system and back to your cerebral cortex, where you experience them via the only way we can experience anything, via a thought, right?
Yeah.
But that's powerful.
I like the idea of barometer too, just as a metaphor, because it goes up and down and changes. You know, it's like the barometer is sensitive to small changes. And so it helps when you're trying to explain to people, like, no feeling is forever.
Right.
You know, some people that are really sad or people that are really stuck in a certain thinking, they're just doomed, you know, to realize that when you look at that as just a barometer, as long as those thoughts are around, it's going to measure what it has. But as soon as your thoughts change, the barometer will give you a different reading.
And as long as you give attention to the thoughts that are there, they're likely to stay. The weather will not change, right? It's interesting. Barometer is also, seen as a measure of the weather, and that's what the feeling state is, kind of the weather, present weather of your mind, huh?
Yeah.
Anybody else have a thought before we go forward? Okay, Ofer, would you like to go next?
Our feelings are evidence of our mental well-being. Find positive and loving feelings, for they will guide you through life far better than resentment and grudges. Positive thoughts and feelings will assist you to discover the mental health and wisdom that lie within you. When you learn to forgive those who have wronged you in the past, you clear your mind and bring harmony into your life, allowing you to see what is instead of what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading this page and I'm thinking about a lot of the guys I work with. It's amazing, but they can go through like 10 or 20 years from the army service and hold resentment towards their commanders or towards themselves, the way they acted, and that once they understand that it doesn't serve them anymore and they are able to let go, you see like a huge load comes off their shoulders. But it's amazing how people can stay with resentment for like years and years and years and years, you know.
And resentment and guilt, huh? Ofer, huh?
Yeah. Guilt. A lot of them stay with guilt, but most of the time it's resentment, because a lot of the people feel that that many veterans they become alienated and like lonely, they break contact with their families, their friends, and a lot of the time they do it because they feel misunderstood.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily has to do with reality here, but it's like, they project their inner feelings on others, but so they are very angry that they feel abandoned and they feel misplaced, and they just hold on to it and they think it over and over and over and over again. And it's amazing. First of all, it's amazing to see sometimes how this guilt feeling or the thoughts can cling into your mind and not let go. And on the other hand, it's amazing to see that once they understand the price they are paying for it, how easily it can come off.
Yeah.
It just happens, when you don't have to you don't always have to go. Usually, when if you do it properly, you don't have to go through understanding and you just,
Mm.
okay, it doesn't serve me anymore, and they just get an insight, and that's it. They cannot go over it. And when I see it, it's always amazing.
Wow.
I mean,
It,
when you
it is a
present the
real.
logic of why are you keeping that, so
Yeah.
usually it takes some time, but once they get a thought that, wait, that
Yeah.
this doesn't serve me, so it's like it paves the way for them to start letting go of resentment and anger again.
You know, you said something about they feel misunderstood, and I have the feeling that in your presence you listen really deeply to where they feel understood, and it opens that that space to where they can have a realization. Would you say that's true? Do you want to say anything more about them feeling misunderstood?
I think that the foundation Waters for Life, one of the things that one of the magic that happens there is that people go in and they always say, I don't need to explain myself. Like everyone understand what I'm going through. And
Yes.
this is always funny for me because, I mean, I get it.
Mhm.
I mean, I get why they're saying that, but it's like when people feel misunderstood, sometimes they forget that people don't see what's going on inside of them.
Mhm.
So they have their thinking and they think that everyone always, they feel that they have to explain themselves to others, you know?
Right.
And this is something we work on. I mean, when I work with guys, so I normalize the situation. You know, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be like this. It's okay to be like this. And that, in its turn, it kind of like it 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 alleviate guilt. Okay, but yeah, people when people said, for me, when I speak to people, immediately I tell them what they think because everyone think the same in the foundation, so
Wow.
they feel understood. You know, it's like you're probably thinking that blah 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 blah, and you're worried about blah 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 blah. You know, because it's like
Yeah.
everyone has the same thought patterns. Okay, and it's like you know, I worked with hundreds of guys already, and it's like everyone have the same thinking patterns. You know, everyone worry a lot, and everyone they compare themselves to other people, and everyone. I mean, most not everyone. I mean, it's like you remember I always use you remember when we were many years ago, you did this table with resentment, like thinking
Mhm.
patterns. You remember that? So I
Mhm.
still use that. I still use that
Yes,
one.
the
I don't
Patsy
remember
scale.
what.
The Patsy scale.
Yeah, so I use
Yeah.
that one a lot. Yeah, I know we like I show them and say, okay, from 1 to 5, how much you worry? And they say 7. And from 1 to 5, how much you feel resentment? And they say 7. And from 1 to 5, how much you have a self criticism? They say 7. You know. And when they hear it, they see it like this, and okay. And we start and we're thinking about these thoughts, and then we talk about those thinking patterns, and we understand together why they don't make sense. And so, and they understand, okay, so you're saying this thinking, that's what creates my feeling. And once they get it, they start, I always point them to ask this question. The thoughts I'm thinking right now, does it serve me to think them? That it has any purpose? But I do it in a very, like a very practical way. I mean, just look at your thinking, don't get attached to them. It doesn't matter if it's a right thought or wrong thought. Does it serve you to think this thought at the moment? And when they start looking at that, so first of all, they go out of their thinking and they look at the thought. So they understand, okay, that's a thought. It's not reality, it's a thought. So something changes. And this is like a first step for me. I mean, this is when I start working with people, this is step one. Afterwards, you don't deal with the content anymore. You see thought as something. But at the beginning, I do find it helpful to deal with the content a little bit. Does that make sense to any of you guys?
Very
Yeah.
much. Yeah. To me, I would say that even though I hear you that that's step one, but step one is that number one, you shared their experience, and step number two is that they get that you care. You know,
Yeah.
that old thing of people don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah.
And then step three is what you call step number one, I think, because they already know that you care, and they know that you understand their experience, but I thought what you just said was beautiful. David, did you have anything before Judy shares or about that?
Well, it's the same the world over. Veterans tend to think that they're misunderstood and that no one in the big wide world is going to be able to relate to them, and they walk around in that mindset, believing it. So that's the reality they have, because they're sort of walking around with a brick wall in front of them everywhere. But as Affair said, pointing out the logic of does whatever you're thinking about now serve you, despite the content? Is it doing you any favors, or anybody you care about any favors at the moment? And that sort of, harsh is the wrong word. I can't think of the right word, but that sort of very logical. Well, is it? Is that helping? And they see that straight away and go, actually, no, it's not. And then it's once people start to see that, it becomes very simple to continue to see things like that. It doesn't stop you from habitually falling back into what you've been doing for however long, but rather than judging yourself when you find yourself stuck in that old thinking, it's oh no, it's not helping me at the moment, and it tends to click faster. And that that's as you said, Affair, it's wonderful to see people have that realization. And sometimes they have it over and over again, and it's like a brand new thing every time they find it. And I have seen other people get stuck on the fact that I should know better now, which again, that's not massively helpful. But
kind of thought, yeah.
But they're looking in a new direction now, aren't they? Both of you
absolutely.
they're now looking in a direction they hadn't looked before. No one had pointed in that direction that you pointed to. Judy, you had something before we moved on.
Well, the only thing I was going to point to is that it was interesting because I was reading through this passage quite a long time ago with some veterans, and they got stuck on allowing you to see what is instead of what isn't. Because in their minds, what was, it is the way it was, so you can't change it. And this was a case where one of the veterans had killed a child who was the same age as his child, and he couldn't get past it. And he said, well, what is that's never going to change. I did that.
Right.
Instead of what isn't. And I said, well, what is now you're you today.
Right.
And what isn't is you in the moment of battle when your sergeant was telling you, shoot, kill them all. And you didn't know it was a child. I mean, you saw shadowy figures and you shot. And that's what was then. That was real. That was the best you could do. But what is now is that you have a different perspective on it. He had never thought of it that way. He thought he had to change the incident in his own mind.
Yeah.
He misread that passage.
Right. To me, it points back to what both David, you and Ofer said, of feeling misunderstood, because the grain of truth is that if you haven't been somewhere where it was kill or be killed,
right,
in the what I'm going to call the craziness of war,
right,
then you don't understand.
That's
You
true.
can you don't. And so I think there's a big grain of truth in the soldiers that say you don't know what it's like when you're going to have to kill another human being or be killed by another human being. You don't know. If you haven't experienced that, you don't know. And I think that's true.
Well,
That's
And I
fair.
think
That's fair.
I have to say that when people speak about understand or not understanding,
Mhm.
they don't speak about the experience at the army. They speak about their experience of PTSD.
Their memories from the army.
No,
Yeah.
they don't speak about their memories from the army. They speak about their
What?
experience of PTSD.
Well,
Because
which
when
is
people
the experience
say-
of
when people that say people don't understand what I'm going through, they speak
Mhm.
about the hardship they're going through. Okay,
in the
They-
moment.
right now.
It's like,
Yeah.
and I give you an example, like it's like, from the side, people don't understand what it's like living in fear all the time.
Mhm.
Okay, when someone with PTSD lives in fear, so it's not something you can explain. the thing I do, and you said something which I actually relate to. I do create this. I mean, it's not. I don't do it on purpose, but when I switch with someone, there's a space of understanding and non-judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, that in itself, you can see after like 40 minutes, the guys, they start yawning. They're like, "Oh, I feel so tired," and they become relaxed, because when they're in the space of non-judgment, they don't judge themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel, so, and they see it as understanding. But I have to say, one of the things I try to tell them always is that they overemphasize the need for people to understand them. When someone speaks to me, the first how do you say, axiom, the first thing I tell them is that, listen, no one can understand what you're going through. No one can understand your thinking. That's your thinking. That's your experience.
Right.
And your need for everyone to understand you, it's making you feel very miserable.
Mhm.
So in a way, we take it out of the way. You understand what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
you don't
Something
need
you don't have control over. Yeah.
people. Don't need people. I mean, I think about it. We live in separate realities, which is something which is something Sid said. Okay, we live in separate worlds, and the moment I emphasize that, something also happens, because I say, okay, so everyone don't have to understand my experience. I don't need everyone to know what I'm going through. It's just enough for me to understand. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Very much. Very much so. And when I said memories, the reason I was going back to what you had said, Ofer, and maybe I misunderstood, but then when people suddenly have a realization, and they might display it in different ways, but they have a different relationship with their memories, and to where they're not causing innocently creating all the symptoms of PTSD, the fear, the avoidance. Once those memories have lost their force field, there's nothing to avoid. And it's not a should, but when it happens, like you said, it's dramatic. Where people will say, those memories, I still have them, but they've lost their force field, or at least they, even if I react to them temporarily, I know to let the reaction pass, and I don't have to get caught up in a cycle of it. Is that off, or is that close
No,
to what?
you're completely right.
Okay.
But it's something you always have to reintroduce.
Reintroduce. And that leads to the next page, which I think really fits with our discussion. And I'm trying to think, whose turn was it?
Brad's turn.
Brad, who's
it's me.
David? Oh,
David's
Fair.
turn, rather. I'm sorry.
That's okay. What isn't is life seen through distorted memories. What is life seen as it truly is now, clear of all falsehoods. The tormented mind, which entertains love and forgiveness as guests, will surely attain new heights. Which I think it sort of sums up what we've been saying quite neatly, I think. But there's an interesting dynamic in there that that we haven't covered, and something that's popped up quite recently with one of the Fijian soldiers I've been speaking to, and that is he's worried that by seeing his thoughts differently, he'll start forgetting about his friends, and he wants to remember them. And at the moment, those memories, some of them are quite unpleasant, but he's desperately hanging on to them because he wants to honor his friends that aren't here anymore. And that's been an interesting conversation, because it's been trying to take him to look, well, you've probably got other memories of them as well, because they were friends before their final moments. And so, you'll have other memories about them as well that you can cherish and use those to hang on to honor them. But you don't necessarily need to be beating yourself up with the unpleasant memories of the final moments, which was something he hadn't considered before. and has given him a little bit of lightness. It doesn't, doesn't mean to say that he's going to forget the
Right.
difficult one, but he's now hanging on to them less tightly because of that fear of forgetting people. And it was something I hadn't considered before he'd mentioned it. And so there's all kinds of little facets hidden away in people's experience and on why they cling on to certain ideas. And it's just fascinating to help and explore how to unpick some of that.
So, it's interesting. I find myself thinking a lot. I wanted to hear from you on that, Ofer. I find myself thinking a lot in terms of Dr. Pransky's book on the Relationship Handbook, where he has a myth, and then he has the grain of truth. And, what I heard, David, as you said, is the myth that people have in their head is, if I forget, if I forget all the painful memories of those that I loved, I will forget them. They will be gone with the painful memory, and the grain of truth is that that somehow there's a grain of truth there that you will forget the pain attached to the love and the closeness you felt with them, but that they will remain. That their memory of them will the painful will be replaced by the reasons you have to hold them in your heart.
Yeah.
That's
the reasons they were there, the reasons that you held them so tightly to start off with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the grain of truth. Something like. But Ofer, God knows that this story from real life. Is there anything you want to add to that? That you would say to that you would point to those and that you do point to, I'm sure, all the time, just like David has to, that people that have lost people that they were dear friends and had shared much with.
I don't know, to be honest. For me, I never saw I don't know, to be honest. I don't know, because I see it in other places. I see it in the people who are holding, like they think that if they don't feel guilty, so it's irresponsible.
Yeah.
It's that other myths. So if I'm not worried all the time, it means I'm irresponsible. If I'm not angry with myself, it means I'm irresponsible. So this is some of the myths I see a lot. Usually when it has to do with I don't know, I think I don't know. I mean, I understand what Dave said. I never had this. Luckily, I mean, for me, it didn't make sense to go there in the first place. So
Yeah.
Okay. Anything before we stop, Judy? Before we stop today's.
I have a question which maybe will come up in the next chapter, but it ends with the tormented mind, which entertains love and forgiveness as guests, will surely attain new heights. And one of the questions that I just don't know the answer to, and I've never really seen it play out fully, is whether people can ever find forgiveness for the enemy.
Yeah, we see it in Israel a lot. I mean, I see people who can forgive. For some people, it's unfathomable. I mean, they don't understand it.
Right.
I think eventually, how Gandhi says that an eye for an eye keeps the whole world blind, or something like this.
Right. Yeah.
For me, I don't see any other choice. I mean, and I have to say, I don't feel grudge towards my enemies. But I think, and Sid also said that you can forgive a person. It doesn't mean you have to forgive an act. Okay, but the way I see it, we are all prisoners of our thinking, and so in a way, even when someone, I had this talk with one of the veterans today, actually, when he was, so I'm supposed to forgive someone who hurt me, and he was like shocked. say, but if I do that, I lose. If I do that, it means like I'm a sucker, you know. And I tried, and I always have with him this conversation again and again. I try to explain and listen, but it doesn't serve you to stay angry. It doesn't make any sense. But I think, and you know, in Israel, you see sometimes like fathers who have lost their children who are able to forgive the person who killed them. So you can't see that. I won't say that it's common.
No.
But you can't see that. I understand those who forgive and I understand those who don't. You know, I mean, it's not like I have any judgment towards any of the side. But for me, even I never felt grudge to anyone, even as I was fighting them. It was never personal for me.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. When I was just a little girl, my Uncle Frank, who was a lot older, he was one of the older brothers in my father's family of 11, had been in World War I. And his ambition had been to be a concert pianist, and he had been enrolled at Yale School of Music and was a great talent. And when he went into World War I, he was a gunner, and he lost the sensitivity to his fingertips, and he had to give up his dream of being a concert pianist because even though he could still play the piano, he couldn't play with the delicacy needed. And so he became a piano teacher and just performed, you know, played for weddings and things like that. And it was sad because, you know, he gave up his dream, but I remember listening to him and my father talking one time, and my uncle was in tears because he said, you know, he said, I've hated the Germans for a long time, you know, because of that war and all the things, the terrible things that happened. But he said, I just realized they were just kids like me. They were just kids trying to help their country. And it changed him, that realization. It was something I witnessed as a child. I didn't understand it until later, but I thought, you know, that would be the ultimate healing to come to that point. So that was beautiful what you said. Thank you.
There was a woman. Thank you, Judy. There was a woman in Israel that recently she went and she wanted to speak with the person who killed her son, and he didn't want to speak with her. I mean, he was full of rage.
Yeah.
That was like the opposite, you know. But
Well,
I do think that eventually, you know, you don't have to go so far to war. You know, I see people carry resentment, a lot of people towards their parents.
right.
You know, and you see people like 40, 50 years old still angry at their parents, you know.
That's true.
And this is something that, it's also something that sometimes you have to reintroduce. You know, there's a story about someone coming to Buddha. And he says, Buddha, you know, I've been doing everything you told me, and I'm doing like meditation, and I'm doing like everything. How do I know if I'm enlightened? You know? So Buddha says, it's very easy. Go to your parents' house and stay there for 1 day. If you can keep calm, it means you're on the right path.
You have understanding. You have understanding. That's so beautiful. And I'm thinking that is a good way for us to end this section.
Yeah.